Welcome to Lumiere! A bit of a departure from our normal stomping grounds of Lordran in Dark Souls, although not really that big of a leap. Not to say that Expedition 33 is necessarily a Souls-like, but it certainly scratches the itch, and has been for me since I picked it up a few weeks ago. In fact, this game is why the Snake video took a month to release, even though I'd finished recording the footage for it before the Doomer vid even went up. However, as impressive as this game has been, I found myself somewhat unimpressed with New Game Plus. I'd gotten to the point where my build was so strong that enemies never even had a chance to attack. And I found myself simply going through the motions to get through each fight. So I decided if I still wanted to squeeze a little more interest out of the game, then the best option would be to put the old challenge runner cap on and think of how I can build a team that can make it through the game without ever using the incredible skills that otherwise trivialized most encounters. So yep, I'm Prakuza, and welcome to DevBox, where today we're asking the question, can you beat Expedition 33 with a massive skill issue? Or more specifically, can you beat Expedition 33 with only basic attacks? There will be some more difficult aspects that will start to make themselves clear as we continue, but for now, this means that I'm only able to attack with the base attack and free aim commands. As we can see with what is supposed to be a tutorial fight on how to use skills against Mael, this means that some fights are going to take some time. Especially since I'll also be abolishing counters from the list of possible forms of attack. Honestly, I think that rule might wind up being the real challenge here. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. For now, we can beat Mael and head down into the festivities below. As our main man, Gustav, flirts poorly with his primary love interest for the game, Sophie. Aren't these two the cutest? You know, in any other game, this would be the meet-cute that leads to Titus and Yuna's blossoming relationship over the next 40 hours of gameplay. But this is Expedition 33, so... Yep, we're in for a tearjerker, folks. And I'm going to say this right now. If you haven't engaged with the story of Clair Obscur before, then this might be a good time to hop off the video and go play the game for yourself. Because this is a game that is absolutely worth experiencing firsthand, and not through an abridged speed-through like I'm going to be giving for the next hour or so. Yeah, if this is somehow your first introduction to Expedition 33's story, go discover it for real. Then come back. Also, this run is only looking to get to the end credits. We're not doing all bosses, because I don't have 50 extra hours on hand to grind up to be ready for, well, if you know, you know. If that didn't make sense, then it won't by the end of the video, and if it did make sense, then I'm going to assume you understand the why for that. Alright. That out of the way, we head into the party being held for expeditioners, have another fight with Mael. This one doesn't go exactly as well, but we get the win on our rematch. And after talking to Gustav's sister, who looks shockingly similar to Sophie, we can finally get this expedition underway. Can't wait for all the wacky misadventures we're going to have with this colorful cast of characters.
Fall back! Snap out!
Well, that didn't go well, now did it? Okay, first real fight. Once again, a lot of these early fights are mostly meant to be tutorials. In this case, we're supposed to be learning about the free aim mechanic, and since we actually have access to that form of attack, we can engage and shoot this Lancier in the glowing weak point in his head. Next up, we meet Lune, who stops Gustav from unaliving himself, and we get another fight that is meant to be the introduction to Lune's skills, and her magic and stains that offers a depth to her build with how her own skills synergize with each other. All things that we'll be ignoring moving forward. Instead, we shoot the portier in the face, then wail on him with regular attacks until we're through the fight and unlock the first Pictos, Dodger. This will be huge moving forward, by the way, as it will give us 1 AP every time we land a perfect dodge, but only once per turn. And at this moment, I want to rant a bit about how useless the perfect dodge mechanic is. Like, the window for perfect dodges and parries is exactly the same, but if we parry correctly, we automatically get an AP as a reward, and if we parry every attack in an enemy's combo, we get to counterattack. The perfect dodges need Illumina in order to do half of that once. Why even bother with the dodge button at all then? Well, in this run, it's because I can't let myself parry every attack, but still. I don't know why the perfect dodge isn't more rewarding, even if it's basically being treated like training wheels to prepare people for parry timing. Okay, rant over. Time to make our way to the next major obstacle, the Chromatic Lancier. Even with skills, we're really not ready for this fight since he insta-kills us with pretty much every attack. However, he has something very important locked away behind this fight, and we're going to want it moving forward. So we reset, learn the dodge timing, focus on that front leg for the quick attack by the way, and eventually we can whittle the mini-boss that might even be harder than the area's main boss down. As a reward, we are given the Augmented Attack Pictos. This will give our base attacks a 50% increase in damage. Considering that those are our main source of damage right now, that's a huge boon. Well worth beating our heads against this obstacle for the hot minute that it took to take him down. Next up is the actual boss of the area, VK. He's actually remarkably easier than the Chromatic Lancier, mostly because this one doesn't kill me in one hit. Also, this is the simplest VK in the game, and considering that in the playthrough before this one, I'd gotten used to the much faster series of attacks with way more complex combos, this is a bit of a walk in the park in comparison. It also certainly helps that towards the end of the fight, VK brings back his weak point for a few turns, giving me ample opportunity to blast him right in the heart and end the fight rather quickly. Cue the kick-ass cutscene finisher.
Gustav! The Patriots must fall!
Alright, with VK finished off, we get a clue to where we can find Mael, and we head off to the next location. We also camp for a moment so Gustav and Lune can struggle with how bad things are and still resolve to continue the expedition. This also seems like a good point to give a quick rundown of how the build is going so far. For our Pictos, we've acquired Augmented Attack, Burning Shots, Dead Energy 2, Dodger, SOS Shell, Cleansing Tint, Critical Burn, Empowering Attack, and Marking Shots. We don't have the Lumina to equip all of it at once, but the most important ones moving forward will be Augmented Attack, Burning Shots, Dodger, and Marking Shots. Critical Burn and Empowering Attack will be nice, but we'll only be getting equipped by whoever has that particular Pictos on, rather than setting it in with Lumina points. Our next stop is in the Flying Waters, an area that has the look of being an underwater coral reef, but it seems like the air is breathable enough here. We find some new forms of Neverons, showing that each location is going to have their own species of the enemies, usually styled to the location itself. Sick bit of design to be honest, and I love the look of some of the guys here specifically. Anyway, as we fight our way through, we find Mael by heading through a strange door that somehow leads us into a manor. This place is officially Wonderland. Nothing seems to make logical sense. Next thing you know, a faceless demon is going to come walking through the doorway. Kill it! Kill it with fire! And bullets! Whew, okay, that's done. What next? I am officially lost now. Also, who's Versa? Okay, guess we're doing this. Well, at least we got some new merch in his shop for doing that. Should probably buy that now. I'm not sure when the next time I'll find Noko as a merchant is. Further into the area, we deliver a bomb to a bomb boy. This is actually the second albino Neveron we found, and once again, it sent us on a fetch quest to get its weapon ready. Well, do as it asked, and make sure not to fight it, and we should be fine. Seriously, don't attack these guys. It'll come up later. And now, Mael has some helpful advice for us.
Avoid those at all costs.
How bad could it really be? So like, bad. Oh, so like really bad. But I'm badder. That took forever, by the way. Made even worse by the fact that I couldn't break him in order to get the swallowed party members back. But it's over now, and we're done with ridiculously difficult fights that I really have no reason to engage with. Why do I do this to myself? Honestly, this guy isn't even worth the trouble. All we get is Energizing Break, something we can't use since we still can't break anything. Well, maybe the next fight will be somewhat more manageable. Daddy, I don't want to be a challenge runner anymore. Yeah, those hang-in-the-air jumps that delay long enough to catch me off guard makes me feel like I'm back in Elden Ring. I leave that up to you to decide if that's a compliment or an insult. Although, want to know what makes this fight even more annoying? It's the first time where I accidentally counterattack, which of course means... Yep, I mentioned it before. I'm not allowed to counter in any way, which means that if I accidentally get only parries because I miscount the combo, then that means I get to restart the entire fight and try again. I'll note that some of these bosses wind up taking upwards of 20 minutes, so restarting this late into a fight is rough. Then we get into phase 2, and I realize that I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep over the last 3 days. Really need to stop trying to do these runs after pulling all-nighters. Okay, it's the next day, I've got at least a few winks in me, and I take him down on basically my first try. Between this and the Dark Souls snack run, I think I'm finding that the biggest challenge for me is going to bed. Who'd have guessed? Aside from the entire body of research on sleep, exhaustion, and their effects on the brain. Oh, and Mael seems to connect to Goblu before it runs away. Looks like Mael's having some trouble sleeping lately too. Good thing she's got best video game dad by her side to help her through the rough times. Sony wishes they could make as good a father figure as Gustav. Alright, next location is Ancient Sanctuary. So we can head to the Gestural Village on Noko's suggestion. The first thing we do is fight a Patank, which goes a bit better than I would have expected considering that these things are super tanky, and usually require being stunned in order to kill them before they run away. Still, we get the damage, due in no small part to having access to free aim shots, and manage to get our hands on some very nice materials. Our next fight is a bit more of a challenge, but the toughest dodge comes after they die. The Sakapatates, piloted by Gestrals who have mistaken us for Nevrons. These guys have a fun interaction with the free aim, where we can attack their weak points enough and it actually removes that part of their body, and they can no longer use the attacks that use that limb. Love it. Fantastic work. As a chronic dragon tail cutter, I can never get enough of strategic dismemberment. We can also see an example of min-maxing our damage in these early sections with the marking shots, because marked targets take 50% increased damage from any source. Which means that to get the best bang for our buck, it's worth it to save some shots and maximize on the base attack damage with the marks. As we continue forward, we land some Pictos, like Attack Lifesteal and Energizing Start. Neither are really critical to the build, but can be nice if we have room for them to get some extra free aim shots and healing. We also find a Chromatin, which I won't really be shouting out when we get in the future, but these are essentially additional uses of this game's version of the Estus Flask to be used between expedition flags, which act as this game's bonfires. I meant it when I said that this game borrows a lot from Souls-likes. Almost Souls-like adjacent. Enough that I would definitely suggest it to anyone interested in From Software games, and that had previously struggled to get into turn-based combat. Finally, we get to the actual boss to the dungeon, the ultimate Sakapatate. Not much changes here between this and the other shield-wielding Sakapatates. And for this one, the hand we can destroy is the one holding the shield, which is nice because the shield slam is pretty difficult to time the dodge for, and the cannons on top of the shield have a really long combo to them. Still, even if he isn't very different from the other Sakapatates, he still kills me once. But a quick reset gets me the win. I'm noticing that the margins for error on expert difficulty are much thinner, as missing a single attack in a combo can wreck my team. That being said, the ultimate Sakapatate isn't exactly at Goblu levels of difficulty, so we're quickly through to the Gestural Village.
Now to find the chief's house. Probably the biggest one.
Yeah, thanks for the tip, Mael. Not sure if I'd have been able to figure that one out without your help. First though, we want to wander around the village for a bit. Like getting back into the manor, what the heck is this place? Picking up roulette down at the casino, which we won't really be using, but it can be a huge boon for some one-shot builds. Then we finally meet with Golgra and get back to that mainline progression. In this case, Golgra wants us to participate in a tournament against a handful of Gestrals. And well, once you've fought one Gestral, you've basically fought them all. Throughout the tournament, we basically wind up fighting the 3 main versions of this fighter type. And even if my damage isn't exactly popping, their attacks are pretty easy to dodge, if not parry. Except for the stomp. I'm terrible at avoiding the stomp. Something about that super delayed windup gets me every time. However, with the Gestrals down, we now have to face against Ciel, another expeditioner who got separated from the rest of us during the killing field that was the Dark Shores where we landed. This is the last living one we're going to find. Fortunately, she's awesome and a great addition to the team in a casual playthrough. However, all of her abilities and weapons lean more heavily on her skills than the others, so she isn't exactly the best choice for this challenge. There's also a specific endgame build I'm working towards that she doesn't slot into. That being said, she's good enough to win the match against us, which I didn't know would still have us continue and gift her a very creepy gestural-inspired weapon. But we specifically chose Mael as our fighter here because we need the weapon that she gets for winning this fight. So let's load a save and get the fight right this time. There we go. And as a reward, Mael is given the Medallum, one of her best possible weapons, and one of only a few ways that we can get her in virtuous stance without using skills. Well worth resetting to get this now, because otherwise we'd have had to beat Golgra in order to get it later. And well, yeah, Golgra kills us instantly. That ain't happening now. Also, wood. But thanks to her, we do have a heading. We need to head to Eskier's cave and recruit the help of a legendary creature in order to make the trip from where we are now to the mainland that the monolith is actually situated on. And how do we do that? Well, we have a password that we apparently need to shout as loud as we can. And supposedly, soft-spoken, well-mannered Gustav is the loudest. So he's the one who has to tell the gestural guarding the way to Eskier to...
Get out of my way!
Honestly, rude. Rude, Gustav. Be better. While we're here, it's not exactly a huge dungeon, but there is some side content to try out, like another Patank that I absolutely failed to kill. This is definitely the expected outcome for these little guys, and I probably won't be getting most of them from here on out, except for maybe the free aim specific ones. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to meet the main man himself, the shining beacon of delight in this entire game, Eskier.
Bonjour, mes amis.
Love him, no notes. Okay, let's go beat up his friend Francois.
Now get off my lawn!
And it turns out he didn't even have the right rock. We're looking for Flory. I don't know if this rock even had a name. Well, looks like we need to go on another little quest to find Flory so that Eskier can let us travel across the world. In the meantime, we do some side content, like the mime in Eskier's cave. We've tried fighting some mimes up until this point, but while I have no real problem with their moveset, not being able to break them means that the fights take forever. However, we're now strong enough that these fights are at least punching under the 15-minute mark. So I can stomach it enough to start gathering up our true outfits for the remainder of the game, starting with CL, who gets to be the first to sport the baguette outfit. We also attempt the chromatic brawler out on the world map, get our teeth kicked in, pivot over to the gestural arena, wail on some gesturals until it's Tiny Head's turn, and then get our teeth kicked in, then go back to the chromatic brawler and finally get a solid win against something that was way above my weight class. The reward is okay, but not exactly worth all that hair pulling. With that win under my belt, I have the confidence I need to go hunt down the remaining two mimes that I've left behind back in Spring Meadows and Flying Waters. These get us the baguette outfits for Gustav and Lune, respectively. We also pick up Mael's Lumiere outfit from a gestural merchant. This is basically baguette, but without the bread, so it'll have to do for now, since Mael's actual baguette outfit is locked behind a decent amount of progression. Anyway, with those nabbed, and an hour of my life thrown away killing another Bersian for no reason, we can head to the Stonewave Cliffs to find Flory, which will allow Eskier to swim. Although, as we arrive, it's difficult to say if him needing his rocks to swim with us is a hard and fast rule.
So, wait. Eskier is that powerful?
Apparently so, but also lazy.
Or if it's a childlike game where the magical Superman needs special rocks as a part of the rule set made up for playtime. Anyway, we continue forward. Most of the regular enemies take a bit of time to kill, but none of them are real troublemakers. Instead, this run has become more of a test of patience and consistent rhythm. Gotta say, this is really making me want to get back into rhythm games. Apart from diving into Melody of Memory for a weekend like, oh goodness, 5 years ago. I really haven't done much rhythm stuff since playing Rock Band back in high school. Suggestions in the comments would actually be greatly appreciated. On the path, we find the manor again, still creepy, give some rock crystals to the albino Hexka, still a mystery of a side quest, and finally make our way to the boss of the area, Lampmaster. This is one of those fights that probably would have been a problem in this run if I wasn't starting it immediately after 100%ing my casual run. Honestly, the biggest difficulty here is the fact that I'm prepared for some of his longer, nastier combos, and I'm caught off guard when he stops his attacks early. So even if there are a few close calls, we get this done in one. And then it's cutscene, 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 and now Eskia can swim us to a new location. Oh, and we have a new guy. Meet Verso. He's not important. Doesn't even have a baguette. Not like Gustav. Where is that guy anyway? Well, anyway, with Flory and our new fighter, we can start swimming around the world, although we can't get past the big coral pieces that block our way quite yet. At this point in a casual playthrough, a lot of fun optional areas open up. But with our lack of damage and the build still being propped up almost entirely by augmented aim and augmented attack, we aren't really ready for much optional content. In that case, we head pretty much directly to the Forgotten Battlefield. And would you look at that? We've got the first major obstacle of the run. It won't be too much of a detriment for a while, but it's definitely enough to be a real problem. That being gradient attacks. See, when an enemy tries to hit us with a gradient attack, the only way to avoid damage is to do a gradient parry. These are usually really easy to counter, as the tell comes from a mile away and the window to nail the parry input almost feels wider than a regular dodge. However, since a gradient parry always leads to a counterattack, I'm not allowed to use them at all. Which means that any time an enemy throws a gradient attack my way, I have to eat it. For the most part, this is going to mean that even minor enemies will be able to one-shot any character they decide to hit with a gradient attack. But these usually only target one character at a time, even from most of the upcoming bosses. Speaking of upcoming bosses, we've got the Duelist, an incredibly unique fight for this point in the game that will naturally appear as an optional fight across several post-game dungeons, which also means that I'm pretty good at parrying this guy. Too good, in fact, because he has a full party attack that hits twice in his second phase, but only hits once in the first phase. And you know what that means? Expedition 33 counterattacks. And I have to reload the But we come back, we get the rhythm, and we get into the second phase where I have a better grasp of his combos. In phase 2, the only real risk here is the full combo that ends with a gradient attack. Otherwise, keeping up with the Duelist is one of the best zen moments of the game. So I glide into that flow state, and the fight is over before I'm ready to give it up. Love this fight. Only note is that he's overused in the postgame. As a reward, we get Combo Attack, which will double our damage from here on out, as it gives us 2 attacks per base attack instead of 1. There's some more versions of this Pictos to find later, but they're way later. Post-game later. We'll get there. Once we're done with the fight, we leave Gustav's arm on a lump of stones. Not sure why, he's going to need that once he's ready to rejoin the group. Almost feels rude to leave it here like that. Well, whatever, I'm sure he'll find it. Time for us to move on. We've got more fights ahead of us, including a couple optional encounters that are worth focusing on for a second. First, there's the Albino Troubadour, who I accidentally challenged while Verso had Inverted Affinity equipped, which means that the green orbs that are supposed to heal wind up hurting me. So there's a decent chance that I outright die to this, even if I succeed. Fortunately, the damage isn't too bad, and we make it through. I'll note that these Albino Nevrons have been giving us rewards like some pretty impressive Pictos, but they aren't even the real points of interest here, although that reward is coming much later. We also fight the Face Man and let this gross titty bounce until he blows himself up. Not sure why he does this, but it gives us some pretty powerful rewards for beating him, mostly upgrade materials for our weapons. But this also showcases my favorite part of the game. While game-breaking builds are absolutely possible, and in fact extremely fun to put together, getting a hang of rhythms can carry even the lowest damage build from start to finish. Hence this run in its entirety. Okay, progression time. Onward to Minoko Station. Not a lot going on here. Some cutscenes and then, well, hello! Who is this man with the bell and the sexy voice?
Your reflexes remain sharp as ever. I approve. Would. Definitely would.
Honestly, can't argue. He looks like a cuddler. After a quick fight against Minoko, which is kind of a backwards tutorial for how he fights, then a fight that is supposed to be a tutorial on gradient attacks, but we turn into a by-the-numbers fight against the Stalact, Minoko joins us with the best character recruitment interaction ever.
I will never join you again.
There will be a lot of fighting, though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There will be a lot of fighting.
Exactly.
Count me in then.
Good.
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 Yes, good.
We also find out that he is our old friend Noko's father/guardian, which I guess explains how Noko knew Verso. Minoko is also best character number 2, right after Eskie. Once again, no notes. He's also super fun to use in a casual run. For this run, however, well, he doesn't really have much to offer over our current Verso Mael Lune trio, so he'll be shoved into the reserves corner for the remainder of the playthrough. Surely ignoring him in CL won't bite me in the ass later. Right? Our next stop is in Old Lumiere, where Minoko immediately fucks up. His words, not mine.
Sorry, I fucked up. I just wanted to show off.
And splits the group. Lune is more than capable of carrying for the Lune CL and Minoko group, and things go okay except for the fact that I, A, suck at dodging the Chevaliers, and 2, am not allowed to dodge their one gradient attack. This gets worse when Mael is alone and she is forced to eat that gradient attack every single time. But don't worry, soon we'll have the whole team back together and we can fight Renoir, which is also a struggle. The biggest issue with this fight is the fact that Renoir likes to vanish characters, which automatically removes them from the fight without any way of reviving them. This is also unavoidable at the moment, because it is, say it with me, a gradient attack, and so we cannot defend against it. Why? Why did I include the stupid no counters rule? Well, it can't possibly get any worse, right? Still, even with these difficulties, we give it a few tries and eventually get through the fight, finally beating Renoir for once. Although, not enough to kill him outright quite yet. Instead, we get some cutscene, find out that Verso is Renoir's son, which is so obvious I was surprised the game treated it like a huge reveal, and Noko heads off to go look for Gustav. Finally, someone who seems to care that our lead has been missing for a while. Hope he's doing okay wherever he is. Anyway, we move past the fact that Verso loves to lie by omission, put a pin in that, and we try to head straight to the monolith. Turns out, the trip isn't all that simple, since there is a gommage barrier that will instantly kill us if we try to pass through it. Looks like we need to look for a weapon that can break through the barrier, and to do that, we need to gather up some chroma from 2 axons, whatever those are. Start off by heading to Visages, which is both the name of the island and the axon that lives here. Apparently, previous expeditions have been here before, so this is supposed to be the easier of the two, which is why we're here first. I actually did the opposite option in my casual playthrough, and there's some unique dialogue back at camp if you do. Neat stuff. I know we haven't really talked about the writing or freedom of exploration up until this point, but that's another point in favor of Expedition 33. Okay, back to the challenge. First thing we do is head to the Sadness Vale, which sees us fight the first Contortioniste, who drops the Contorso weapon, which is a major game changer, as this will let Verso break enemies with his base attack. This means we can finally stun enemies and force them to skip their turns. Sometimes. It won't exactly come up on a lot of the boss fights, but it does help against the normal fights and mini-bosses, like the Sorrowful Chapelier. Mael going full burn build helps with a lot, as the burn stacks manage to keep our damage potential in line with a casual playthrough. This is accomplished with Mael's Brularum weapon, which will apply 2 burn to an enemy for every hit on the base attack. So, with the combo attack ability equipped, we get 4 burn per turn, plus whatever else she happens to get through the RNG of the burning shots. It's not quite at our endgame level, where we'll be stacking on ridiculous amounts of burn thanks to our stronger builds, but it's at least something for now. Next up is the Joyful Vale, and look at the folks dancing in the distance. I played Elden Ring, I know this part. Let's join in the dance! Uh-oh, this is not Elden Ring. I repeat, the dancing ladies are not nice this time. Well, the jovial Moisanu goes fine. We're actually pretty strong now, even if our builds are kinda squishy. We also finally picked up Verso's baguette outfit by killing the mime in Joyful Vale. Finally is the Anger Veil, and yeah, we blast through this area too and kill the seething Bucheklier without much trouble. Next. Oh, Visages is next. Neat. The first phase goes pretty well and has some interesting mechanics, like being able to shoot the eyes out of the masks that appear in the mirror in order to shatter them when they try to retreat and stop them from returning later. Lets you pick and choose a little if there's one mask that you prefer to fight against, as you can let it escape and return, but then destroy the ones you struggle at dodging. However, in my experience, the toughest attacks to dodge are the ones that pull the camera all the way out. Not a fan of those. Look, they're cool and bombastic and spectacular, but with the visual reference of the player character being so obscured by this distance, I struggle to keep the timing. Still, we make it through and get into phase 2, where we move from fighting Visages to the Mask Keeper himself, the real Axon. This part is a bit harder than the first phase, who'd have guessed, and he gets a kill on me before I can get a handle on his patterns. What really sucks about this is that losing to Mask Keeper means starting over at the first phase against Visages. Like, I know that's pretty common for multi-phase fights, but it's still annoying. Especially with how simple the Visages fight is, it's not really interesting enough to be fun to repeat if you're struggling against Mask Keeper. On the second attempt though, we get a better handle on the Mask Keeper, and the glass cannon builds I've got my party running manages to melt the boss before he can cause too much trouble. We finish off the fight with some cutscenes, including Ciel having some personal growth as the Mask of Determination can't control her, because she is determined. We get the kill, Verso says some cryptic stuff about himself for some reason, and we hand over the Visage mask to— oh shit! Who let that thing back in here? Quick, SKA, take us away!
Enfant used to be all wee, but now is all ooh. I too am ooh, but I'm also wee, so the wee balances the ooh.
You might say you're a bit, wee-woo, then.
You really get me, Verso.
I'm a bit, wee-woo myself. Although I'm a bit more woo than wee these days.
Yeah, bud. We all feel a bit wee-woo these days. I was contractually obligated to include this scene, by the way, by order of the SKA is Best Bean Committee, aka my girlfriend. Alright, so we've killed one Axon, time to try out the other. What could be so bad about Seren to make her the more difficult of the two?
What's going on?
I don't know.
She's manipulating your emotions. You have to focus. Remember why you're here.
And Monoko proves himself as second best bean once again. Well, the dungeon itself is pretty much until we get to our first mini-boss, the Tissier. He's pretty weak to our fire damage, which makes him a fairly easy fight, as long as I can get the dodge timing down. I hope you're noticing the pattern here, because understanding the dodge timing is basically the key to every fight here. Honestly, if I couldn't dodge at all, this build wouldn't be even close to viable. More impressive than the fight itself is the rewards. First, we get Anti-Charm, which will hard counter the most destructive thing that Seren does throughout her entire fight. Second will come up when we actually get to Seren. But needless to say, this was a necessary step to get the win. The next mini-boss is Glissando, a giant cloth snake thing. It's got a pretty interesting mechanic for shooting its rattlesnake tail to keep it from using some really painful attacks, but aside from that, it goes rough. But we barely snake out a victory of our own when the reserve team comes in clutch. Honestly, I didn't really believe they had it in them, not with unupgraded weapons and no Lumina. So, Seren herself, how's she do? Well, the fight is bombastic and quite the spectacle. I honestly like her whole vibe a bit more than Visage's, especially with the journey vibes we get on the approach to her. Only instead of traveling up the mountain, we're descending down to her stage. Some great visuals here overall. The fight itself, though, is made considerably easier after having fought the Tissier. For one, if we don't have Anti-Charm, then she'd charm a different character every turn. who would then turn around and kill the rest of the party on their turn. So getting rid of that makes her considerably less dangerous. To note, I didn't kill the Tissier in my casual run, so I also know that she would have otherwise gained a bunch of shields throughout the fight, which would have really hampered our damage potential. For now, the only danger she offers is when she, like Visage's, pulls the camera so far out that I can't really visualize the dodge timing. The sound cues help, but they aren't always the most reliable. But we survive, build up some burns, and light Seren up until she finally falls. Now it's cutscene time until we make it to the final march on the monolith. First we need to turn in Seren's claw to the and Mael gets the barrier breaker. A decent weapon, actually, for anyone who hadn't already picked up the Metalum yet. With that, we can break the barrier and head into the monolith proper. We immediately attempt to take on the Paintress, but it would appear that the power of her giant feet is too much, and she is impervious to all of our attempts to attack her. Cutscene, 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 and we're suddenly inside the monolith. This is easily the longest dungeon in the entire game, with a whole "look how far you've come" motif, as we head through warped versions of all of the previous dungeons. These are mostly rehashed enemies, except for the additions of the Clairs and Obscures that are scattered around the area, which gives us a nice opportunity to comment on what Clair Obscure means, because I didn't know going into the game. I thought it would be a person the whole time, but it turns out that Clair Obscure is the French version of the Italian term chiaroscuro, which is used to describe the use of contrast between light and darkness in artworks, originating during the Renaissance to describe paintings that made prolific use of the subjects doused in light while in environments that are enshrouded in deep shadow. However, the term is still used in critical discussion of art today, so it's not a purely antiquated title. Neat stuff. Anyway, the monolith is extremely long and starts to offer me a ton of trouble around the point where we arrive to Old Lumiere, and the Chevalier enemies absolutely rip me apart. Not only are they resistant to my burn damage, their attack patterns are also some of the most difficult for me to wrap my head around. Definitely a personal problem of getting into their rhythm, but damn, do these guys hit at exactly the right pace to trip up my twitchy dodges and parries. Finally, in the monolith, we arrive at Renoir, the absolute most difficult fight in this entire run. He fights very similarly to how he did before, except now he has multiple gradient attacks that we can't counter, and one of them will hit the entire team all at once, while the other is again that vanishing attack that removes a character entirely. And that's all phase 1. The real trouble comes in phase 2, when he summons a spectral lion to come give him a mid-fight heal, removes his break buildup, and starts fighting on the man's behalf. The lion adds a few issues, but worst of all is the addition of another gradient attack, one that instantly kills my entire team if it hits. There's a quick fix here to offer me a little more survivability by using an aspect of the Pictos that I haven't really leaned on until now. Turns out, in addition to unlocking skills, each Pictos also offers some sort of stat boost, either adjusting speed, defense, crit rate, or, in the case that we're looking for now, total health. So we drop all of our glass cannon skills, pop on health boosting Pictos, and go for the fight again. Now, we're able to survive some of the gradient attacks, as long as he only uses one at a time, and I'm able to heal in between each use. Unfortunately, Renoir also gets to attack twice with each turn, and his speed is high enough that this sometimes turns into him attacking 4 times in a row. The result is that while there is a chance of survival now, I need to get good RNG so that he doesn't overly spam the gradient attacks. And I need to never take any damage from any other attack, so that I can survive when he does decide to use a gradient attack. This took days of attempts. Literal days. Want to know the kicker? In the run that actually got me the win, Renoir never once used a single gradient attack. It was literally luck that got me through the fight after days of beating my head against this wall. Not gonna lie, that part of this challenge was not fun. Not because Renoir isn't a good fight, his patterns are sick and it feels really great to parry him. But with the stipulation of never counterattacking, this fight is the single dark stain on this entire run. Well, one of two, but we aren't there yet. Where we are instead is at the final fight against the Paintress. Oh, and it turns out she might be Renoir's wife, but also somehow related to the Curator? What with them both being faceless, fractured statues barely held together by some magical essence? Well, time to end this run and finally kill the Paintress. This goes a lot better than Renoir. Not enough for her to not kill me, mind you, but I'm definitely less at the whim of RNG for whether or not I'm going to make it through the fight. Once again, the biggest problem attack for me is the one where the camera pulls all the way back, and I have to dodge without really being able to see my own characters. Again, these look sick, and watching back the footage, I love the visuals. But in practice in the game, I'm not a big fan of having next to no visual telegraph for when I'm supposed to dodge or parry. I also absolutely suck at dodging the void meteors. Not sure what it is there, but I cannot figure out what the proper timing for these things is. Other than those issues, our healthy builds muscle us through the fight, eventually. My final attempt here actually takes about 15 minutes, from the start of Phase 1 to the end of Phase 2. Par for the course on this run, to be honest, as it's been more of a test of patience than anything, but we get our victory and can move on to the end of the game. Bye-bye, Paintress. Plant the flag and revel in our victory. Verso looks sad and reads a letter, and everyone gets gommaged. The hell? Oh, there's a lot more video left, isn't there? Alright, let's get back in this. Okay, we get a bit of flashback to 16 years ago painting time. Unclear how long that is for real world time. And it turns out Maëlle is Alicia. She got sucked into the canvas while trying to go in and pull her parents out of it. That's how she's reborn as Maëlle and why she didn't remember her old painter life before now. We talk to Verso and the real Renoir. Turns out everyone seems to have differing opinions on the fate of the canvas, and Maëlle needs to escape with Verso and Minoko on Esquier in order to not be pushed out of the painting while the others are deleted. Maëlle revives Ciel and Lune, then she creates a zombie army that Minoko names the greatest expedition in history, and right now we can actually head straight to the end of the game. But first, we need to go do some side quests, because I want to. Also, I promised an absolutely broken build, and we aren't even close to that yet. While I'm not planning on going for every single optional area, we will be completing the 3 side quests our companions, Minoko, Maëlle, and Lune, offer us. Not sure why Ciel doesn't get one, but we'll do the others. Our first stop is actually to fight Francois for Esquier. Yeah, we need one more rock so that we can dive, and Francois actually has this one. So we beat him up, get the rock, and now we can access the hardest optional dungeon in the game. Oh, and we can also pick up some Color of Lumina scattered around in the ocean. No worries about that super dungeon though. We won't be going there. Honestly, Renoir kind of took the wind from my sails on continuing this run at all, so I kind of want to finish these final goals and be done. Sorry for anyone hoping to see me fight that one guy. Where we will go is to fight the Chromatic Demineur, the guys holding the big mine in the Flying Waters, in order to get the Angerim, Lune's burn stacking weapon. We're almost ready to start really stacking crazy burn on enemies. Next up, we'll start up Maëlle's side quest, heading into the giant tower known as the Reacher, the home of an axon painted by Renoir and supposedly based on Alicia. But that's not what's important. What is important is fighting another mime in order to finally get our last baguette outfit. This time for Maëlle. Yeah, the whole gang is finally here. Except for Gustav. Seriously, where'd that guy go? Well, as we continue up the Reacher, we find out that Maëlle gets vertigo, and apparently Renoir absolutely didn't understand his own daughter, even if everyone keeps saying that she's his favorite. Then we find the painted Alicia, our Verso's sister, who was also painted by... You know what? This isn't the video for that kind of breakdown. Let's go ahead and fight her. And die instantly. We'll come back. Still gotta put the rest of the build together. It's okay, we really only came here for the baguette for now anyway. Let's head to the Dark Gestural Arena next. Why? For the build! So, let's kill some Gestrals. If you fought one Gestral, you fought them all. And after doing 3 rounds in this arena, we are given Combo Attack 3, which will give us 1 extra hit per base attack. Well worth the effort of coming here, even if we're so early that when Golgra comes to bust the secret arena up, we lose the fight against her. Weirdly enough, it doesn't let me challenge her here again after losing. But it's fine. All we really miss out on is some grandiose chroma catalysts. an upgrade material for leveling weapons up to 32. With our new combo attack boon, we can head to fight Sprong, the big robot guy wandering around in the middle of the ocean. We've technically been able to fight him since the start of Act 2, but we haven't been strong enough to actually deal damage until now. The major boon here comes from the painted power we got at the start of Act 3, but this victory mostly comes from being able to dodge most of Sprong's attacks. He's a pretty simple fight, all things considered, but I would definitely suggest waiting until you can break the damage limit before fighting him. Because even if he is simple, spending 30 or more minutes on one fight isn't really worth the effort. Although in Sprong's case, the actual reward is definitely worth picking up now, since beating him drops the cheater Pictos, which means that everyone now gets to immediately take 2 turns in a row, like Painted Renoir did back in the Monolith. That cheater. Next up is Frozen Hearts, which we're mostly here for in order to pick up some grandiose chroma catalysts to upgrade our weapons. We still aren't at max, and Verso is really lagging behind since he doesn't have his final weapon for the build yet. But once we finish up with Frozen Hearts, we can take care of that in Dark Shores. Back where it started, we can fight the hand dudes that killed most of our expedition when we first landed here. Man, this would have some real catharsis if Gustav was with us to take revenge on these things. Seriously, dude, where'd you go? You were like the best part of this game for a while, now gone. Leaves a real hole in the rest of the cast. A void that's vaguely Verso-shaped, but it's not his hole. That hole is not for him. He doesn't fit. So now that we can finally kill the first group of handmen, they're really called Noir, we can get the Corpesso, which will be Verso's primary weapon for his burn build. It applies 2 burn per perfection rank, and the burn damage ratchets up between 50% to 300%, also based on rank. This is the real key to the burn build, and from here on out, Verso is our MVP when it comes to burn damage. He'll be able to deal out literally millions of damage at a certain point. With that done, we can head back up through the Monolith and back to the Paintress's arena to fight the Chromatic Claire Obscure, a boss version of the black and white enemies we fought the first time we were in the Monolith. It's a tougher fight than I was anticipating at first, with a few attacks posing some serious obstacles for me. For one, there's the gradient attack, which auto-kills whoever it hits. Then there's the silencing attack, which can be dodged, but has exactly enough of a delay to throw me off and catch me up. Even with the backup of the second chance we got after beating Renoir, reviving us after death, this one is still a brutally difficult fight to have to survive through with such a low damage. The reward, though, is the final combo Pictos. Combo Attack 2. With all 3 equipped, we can now attack 4 times per base attack. That's an instant 4 times improvement on our damage, with even higher potential for even more damage since each attack can also land critical hits individually. For the final part of what will be our final build, we head to Chosen Path, a location that very specifically punishes us for not having invested any upgrade materials in Ciel or Monoko, because everyone in the party needs to be used in at least one fight. This means that we have to suffer through some pretty long fights to start this location off. But eventually, we get to the final 3 where Mael, Verso, and Lune are able to pretty much breeze through the rest of the location. The reward here is Base Shield, which will apply 1 level of shield on each party member if they don't already have one when their turn starts. While Base Shield doesn't necessarily save against losing Verso's perfection rank or hold for long enough to stop an entire combo, it's enough of a buffer to make sure that missing a single dodge or parry won't immediately kill anyone. Definitely worth the effort, even if most of the upcoming bosses use like 15 hit combos that the Pictos won't really be able to fully defend against. Okay, between everyone now having their fire weapons, base shield, second chance, and cheater, we've got a heavy survival build. Then for damage, we've got double burn to make sure that we're really stacking up that burn damage with each character. Finally, first strike means that we get to start off strong by stacking those burns on before enemies get their first turn. A huge benefit, to be honest. So now, we should go ahead and test this out against the remaining side quest bosses. Back to the Reacher! This time, we absolutely destroy Alicia. The extra turn and starting before she does means that she never even gets a chance to fight back before the burn kills her at the start of her first turn. Considering that last time I died before getting my own turn, let that show exactly how goated the build is. Oh, and we help Alicia pass on, even if Verso is pouty about it. Does seem cruel, huh, Verso? Someone letting the person you're closest to die before you get the chance to say goodbye, without even taking your feelings into consideration. Guess a lie of omission before you lose everything precious to you really repaints what could otherwise be seen as a kindness to the person being allowed to pass on. Huh, Verso? Huh. You'll never be as good as Gustav. Next up on the side quest path is Serene's Dress, where we find the chromatic glissando. Not much different from the other glissando, only a little stronger. After racking up a bunch of burns, the chromatic glissando goes down quick, and we can free aim the ballets that he summons after he dies. As a reward, Lune gets a bit of closure about her parents both believing in her as well as putting the weight of the world on her shoulders. A bit mixed, but families are complicated, right? Finally, we can head to the Sacred River, so we can try to find Noko. Minoko's been worried about him since he left, and we can apparently summon him by sticking this jar into the Sacred River. Golgra tries to stop us, we beat her in a fight, as Verso absolutely carries. Then she lets us summon Noko, but it seems like he might have hit his head while he was away, because he doesn't seem to remember much about the rest of the group. I hope he feels better soon. And too bad he still doesn't seem to have found Gustav. Now we've got one more stop before we finish off the game. Up until now, we've met a handful of albino Neverons and helped them out. So now we can talk to the albino noir at the fountain. He thanks us for helping them and not killing any of the other albino Neverons, and gives us 100 lumina. We didn't even get them all, by the way, but we did get enough for the reward. With that lumina heading straight into the veins of my main 3, we can finally head to Lumiere. Alright, time for the final level. The vibe here is absolutely incredible. No notes. I love the spectacle of the reanimated expeditioners fighting off against Renoir's paintings, and even if the area isn't that hard in comparison to some of the stuff I've been doing, it's still a fantastic cap for the game, especially considering how it started, compared to how it's going. Talk about look how far we've come. As for the real fights that matter, we've got Creation, a crazy sculpture that we saw in Renoir's atelier back in the real world, now brought to life in the canvas. He's pretty easy because our build is pretty overpowered, so we kick his ass and move on through the Opera House to find Renoir. On the way, we also find the Lost Journal of Expedition 60. A group of buff geriatrics, remember expeditioners are generally 1 year of age younger than the expedition number, who apparently weight-trained their way through the Gommage barrier and found the truth about Renoir under the monolith. This game is amazing. Alright, time for the final fight against Renoir. Hey, what? Is he wearing the baguette outfit? I had no idea that he would join us with the bread backpack before coming here, but I absolutely love that they changed his clothes for this. Seriously, this game is almost perfect. Anyway, fight time. Well, I'm sure that this fight is incredible and nuanced and really pushes players to their limits. They don't have a completely broken build. Yeah, turns out the build as it is now, even without being max level or having fully leveled my weapons, will still beat Renoir so quick thanks to our 6 turns in a row racking up 500 stacks of burn that he never gets the chance to even attempt to attack us. Yep, that's the final boss, killed before he can even attempt to put up a fight. I said this build would be totally broken by the end, right? Well, now that we've got Renoir, we get a couple cutscenes. Verso proves himself to be the worst character in all of fiction by revealing that he wants to destroy everything anyway, even if he'd led his friends astray into believing that he was fighting to keep them alive or reunite them with their loved ones. And it turns out that Maëlle absolutely lied in her final monologue with her father about her character growth, and would absolutely wind up succumbing to the allure of addiction to escape into the canvas. So yeah, pick one of the two endings, doesn't really matter which one, they're both trash. I'll note here that this is my opinion on the ending, not an objective statement on it, and while I do understand what it is and that tragedy could be a suitable ending, especially for the tragic story we've been following so far, it's the lack of growth of Mael and the character assassination of Verso manipulating the others to lead them to their own deaths that I don't like, okay? We all understand where the objection is, we all good to move on like adults with our own reads on the ending, and roll credits. Wait, why is there so much time left on the bar down there? No. No. We are not doing that. Please? I don't want to fight Simon. So, we breezed over that final boss a little too easy, and almost felt a bit underwhelming to leave it there. In that case, feels appropriate to head into the post-game and take on the real final bosses of Expedition 33. Now, while there are tons of chromatic variations of different enemies that we could run down and kill in sequence, there are 3 major bosses that really deserve their time in the sun when it comes to the endgame challenges. We'll call them the big 3 for now, and we'll start working on clearing them out. However, to prepare, we're doing a bit of a grind in order to get a decent amount of Color of Lumina, so that we can really supercharge our builds. To do this, we've returned to Old Lumiere. You know, the city with all the glowing swords shoved into it. Wonder what that's all about. And we're fighting the Chromatic Danseuse. The reason we're doing this is that every time the Chromatic Danseuse is left on the battlefield with no backup, she will always summon 2 clones to come fight by her side. Well, for whatever reason, each of these clones drops 5 Color of Lumina when killed. And by each, I mean each time she summons another set of 2. We get 2 more drops of 5 Color of Lumina. So for each summoning, we get an extra 10 Lumina points that can be used to equip extra skills. There are some other farming locations that people have figured out, but without the use of skills, this one is one of the best to go for right now. That being said, this farm is a one-time only thing, and the longer you keep at it, the more unstable the game gets. At first, we're talking some major stuttering, then eventually the frame rate absolutely tanks. And finally, if you go for too long, the game will ultimately crash, especially on console, which is what I'm playing on right now. That's why even though it is possible to farm literally thousands of Lumina here, I'll only be getting about 350, because I'm afraid of my PS5 crashing in the middle of the farm and having to start it all over again. Still, with that much Lumina, we don't have to pick and choose nearly as much when it comes to our builds. Each character gets First Strike, along with the Base Shield Survivor Solidifying trio, which essentially gives us 4 free hits before we die. And that's before Second Chance even comes into play. We also all get to keep Cheater and the 4 combo attacks alongside all of our burn boosting abilities. Of course, these builds aren't one size fits all, and we'll see the effect of that as we head for Big 1 in the Flying Manor. Now, the location itself is a bit of a tricky one, with a bunch of really powerful enemies here. In order to progress further, we need to kill 4 bosses, all of which we fought before. We've got Goblu, the Duelist, Evike in Fire, Ice, and Thunder flavors, and finally there's the Lampmaster. Most of them are pretty standard fights, with Goblu and Lampmaster going down extremely quickly to the burn build. Duelist's burn resistance makes the fight take forever, but I'm pretty comfortable with his moveset, mostly because of doing this endgame stuff in my casual playthrough. Then there's the Evike triplets. That requires Lune to use a different weapon in order to make sure that we can actually damage the fire variant. Even so, the fights take forever, but they aren't exactly the most difficult. What is difficult is what comes after we open the door to the Flying Manor, where we find Clea. I kinda skipped over her in the story segment, but this is Alicia's older sister. In this case, this is the painted version made by their mother alongside Verso. So it's really more of his sister. She's also apparently been Francois's best friend for a while. In that case, it's rather unfortunate that the real Clea painted over her and made her endlessly create Neverons, as in all of the Neverons that can be found everywhere in the world. Keep that in mind as we now have to fight her. Clea, mother of all Neverons. So this fight is interesting, especially for this run, because it's one of the first times since Renoir in the Monolith that my aversion to counterattacks will specifically bite me in the ass. This is because for every turn that she attacks, Clea also prepares to heal herself by a considerable amount. Upwards of 1.5 million damage healed per turn, in fact. In a casual playthrough, the way to stop this healing is to land a counterattack. However, in this playthrough, I need to rely on the burn stacking to stop her from constantly regaining all of her health back faster than I can dish it out. On a first attempt, her moveset and the healing overwhelms me and I'm quickly killed. Still, it doesn't take too many attempts to take Clea down. Then again, she's the easiest of the big three. And to think when I first beat her in my casual run, I thought this was the peak of Expedition 33's difficulty and design. Then I arrived at the Endless Tower. Full disclosure, I actually started Endless Tower first because it's a great way to start leveling up once you head into the post-game content. The ratcheting difficulty of the 33 trials power levels you up to the threshold best suited for some of these super bosses. So I'd started this already when I went back to finish off the Flying Manor, then came back to finish this after beating Clea. As for the trials themselves, most are pretty by-the-numbers fights, although some of the later stages start putting me up against enemies that are either resistant to or absorb fire damage. So the burn build isn't perfect for this, but it does well enough to get us through, even if Verso and Lune have to periodically swap their weapons out to give me the variety necessary to make it through each fight. The two biggest obstacles here include the Chromatic Luster, who takes ages to kill, and the Chevalier enemies, whose attacks I consistently struggle to get a hang of. Fun fact, my girlfriend started playing musical soundtracks as our second screen/background music, which led to two specific problems. One, lots of enemy attacks have sound cues that are critical for properly dodging and parrying. B, trying to sing to a song that has one rhythm, because I can't help myself, while dodging a combo that has a totally different rhythm is like trying to pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time. Possible, but damn if it don't break my brain. Eventually though, we get through the tower and make it to the final fight. Painted Love. Hey, remember how we beat real Renoir so quickly that we might as well have never even saw his moveset? Well, we get to see it now, and it's pretty sick. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Black Hole and Void Cross attacks. Everything else goes on for long enough that I really struggle to keep the dodges up from start to finish. My own skill issues aside though, with both Renoir and Aline ratcheting up to 11 and given enough health to survive for a while even against this broken ass build, even the Paintress's moveset feels incredible in this fight. Absolutely love Painted Love. No notes. I also have a bit of a better outlook on Renoir after fighting these two, and after a couple of attempts in spreading the burns across both halves of Painted Love, we get our win. It's hard-earned, but more a matter of patience than anything else. And then there was one. I really didn't want to have to do this. Time for Big 3. Simon. Locked away beneath Renoir's drafts. Not much to say about the area, but for the approach to the boss, I will say that this place is extremely Dark Souls coded. The endless drop down into the dark abyss, finding Simon, the one-armed swordsman of legend from Expedition 0, who happens to be the toughest boss in the game after his mind has been tainted by the father found down here in the darkness. It's Artorias. And honestly, his moveset and phase transitions almost make him as good as Artorias. Hell, his basic design is actually way more fun to engage with now than Artorias is these days, even if that is my favorite fight from DS1. There are so many aspects that elevate Simon like no other. The way that he steals our shields before each turn, which ruins my own burn build and forces me to take off base shield and solidifying in future attempts. And yes, this is going to take multiple attempts, because after we take out his first form, we're given a cutscene with some lore, and Simon's weapon grew 3 sizes that day. Then we're brought into Phase 2, against the best fight in all of Expedition 33. Right up until we get to one of the worst boss mechanics that I have ever seen in a video game in my life. Like, I get it. The game wants me to use the whole party, forcing me to use my reserves to take on the final third of Simon's health bar. However, with Ciel and Minoko having been completely starved for Lumina, getting them up to the point that the others are at would require a ton of grinding. Or I would have to split up my team between these phases, which would put a major dampener on my damage potential in both sections of the fight, making this incredibly tedious. For now though, I give this a few attempts and it becomes clear that the build still needs some work to survive the fight. So I head out and gather up some more materials. Namely, I go fight Serpentfair in order to get Energy Master. Interestingly, on this fight, this challenge actually made Serpentfair much easier than on my casual playthrough, because every time I shoot him, he absorbs the AP instead of taking the hit. So if everyone spends their turns pumping the boss full of AP, they might not do extra damage with the shots, but they do overstuff him and force the boss to explode. Combine this with Cheater, and even if I fail to dodge the explosion, I don't really have to suffer the lost turn from getting stunned and can freely wail on the boss. Yep, I wind up killing this guy without even seeing his moveset. Crazy, because his moveset is really weird and tough to respond to. As a result, we get Energy Master, which we can then combine with Energizing Shot. The result is that every time we take a free aim shot, we have a 20% chance of regaining 2 AP, which essentially means we have potentially infinite free aim shots. This is what winds up turning the tide in our favor against Simon. For one, it means we can continuously do damage to him, sure, but this also winds up skyrocketing Verso up to rank A or S in a single turn, as his perfection rank increases with each of the nearly infinite shots taken. As a result, Verso can deal incredible damage and stack up almost 80 burn in his Cheater double turn. It's enough to push the fight a little more in my favor, but it's not enough to completely overwhelm Simon. For that, we need one more Pictos that we've had access to for a long time, but never bothered to use until now. Roulette. Turns out, Roulette can activate on any damage, including burns, which means that if Verso is at rank 6, we stack enough burns on Simon, and we flip the coin right while within a certain threshold of Simon's total health, we can skip the third phase entirely. How's that for a broken, strong build? This took hours of attempts, by the way, waiting for RNG to line up perfectly so that we could hit the damage threshold, and for Roulette to help the burn get the kill. But hey, we did it. We beat Simon without using any skills or counters. Base attacks and free aim only. Was it worth it? Well, most of the challenge was fun, like Simon, right up until that removed from the canvas phase transition. Honestly, I'd have no complaints if that was removed, but as it is, Simon is kind of a millennia to me. Could be fun, could be cool, but one mechanic makes me never want to even approach this area again. A well-meaning attempt to add some difficulty and make players utilize their full toolkit that hits so bad that it sullies the rest of the experience as a result. Which sucks, because while I never want to do the Simon fight again, I have another build idea I want to try in New Game Plus, where we finally find Gustav again. So that's where you've been hiding, you son of a bitch. But hey, that's a story for another time. See you soon. Hey, it's that time again. The end of the video where I invite folks to come check out the Patreon, link in the description, and make good on the rewards for those currently pledged. Patreon members get early access to new content and their names written in the credits at the end of videos. And those who pledge $5 or more get their names read out, like our DevBox designers, Genghis Braun, and our DevBox developers, Azul. Thanks for your support, and thanks for watching. Golgra gets angry. What's that? Fucking wood!